And welcome to Business Connections, a program of the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Holly Allen, the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. We usually talk about business issues here on Business Connections. Today we're taking a little broader view. We're going to talk about a major event that will soon be happening in our community that will affect all of us, including the business community. And to help me with that, today we have Jeff Duford from the Air Force Museum, the National Museum of the United States Air Force, and Mary Bruggman. She is with the foundation that supports the museum. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us.
So we're talking about a major event that most people have probably heard that this is coming up, that you're opening a fourth building at the museum. And this is a fairly large expansion. So Jeff, I'll turn to you. Can you tell me about what this means to the community? Just how exciting is this for us to see this opening this summer?
This is a really important step for the museum and for the community. It increases the size of the museum by about a third.
Wow. Now
the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force is the world's largest and oldest military aviation museum. Now think about that. That's right in our community. We have a true world resource. And even though it's the largest now, it's going to be getting even larger. And in fact, the new building it's about 800 feet long, about 240 feet wide. To give the folks at home some idea about the size, you could fit about 4 football fields, including the end zones, on the floor of this new building. It's a vast building.
It's amazing to think about, because for those of us who've been to the museum, it's as it is now, it is so large, you can't barely cover it all in one day. So to be expanding it by that much, that's a lot of extra stuff to go into the museum. And I know you've been working getting ready for this opening. Can you tell us when the opening date is, the grand opening?
The grand opening is on the 8th of June, but in addition to the grand opening, we'll have lots of activities on the 11th and 12th of June that weekend.
Okay.
We're still finalizing what those activities are going to be, but we definitely encourage the viewers to check our website and to stay updated on the events that will happen.
Okay, so that will be a big weekend. We definitely want to mark the calendar for that. Let's take a step back and talk about how this project even began, which I know the foundation, I'm sure, is what sparked that. Where did the idea come from to expand the museum to begin with?
Well, originally, 55 years ago, 4 Dayton area businessmen started the foundation with the vision of providing a permanent home for the Air Force Museum.
Okay.
Since then, it has grown, and as Jeff can tell you, the 4th building, they needed the room.
Believe it or not, they needed the room. That's how many planes you have.
Yeah, desperately. In fact, there are Air Force aircraft that are enormous, especially the transport aircraft.
Right.
And the museum has essentially doubled in size in the last 15 years. And what the new building allows us to do is to better tell the story of the U.S. Air Force and the men and women who make the history that is the U.S. Air Force. The new building will have 4 distinct galleries.
Okay.
One is our space gallery, another one is our R&D gallery for research and development, our global reach gallery, which is essentially our airlifters, and then a gallery that is about the presidential airlift. And each gallery is distinctly different. And one of the amazing things, and it's another example of what the museum is as a world-class facility, for instance, the presidential collection is the largest collection of presidential aircraft in the world.
Wow.
The Research and Development Gallery has 42 R&D aircraft. That collection is the largest R&D collection under one roof in the world. So in addition to these galleries and our ability to tell stories we haven't been able to because of size constraints, there will also be 3 learning nodes. One is a learning node that's kind of custom designed for to talk about space and R&D. Another learning node is about presidential airlift, and it's really pretty neat. It's kind of like you're stepping onto a presidential aircraft with the aircraft windows and things like that. So those will be wonderful for educational programming, in particular our STEM programming with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Okay. And Jeff, you talked about needing the space. So you have all these aircraft that until now didn't have a home. Can you give us a behind the scenes look? Where were those aircraft kept before? And how did you decide what goes into this new location?
That's a great question. Our presidential aircraft and R&D aircraft were in 2 hangars on the guarded side of the base. It was very difficult to get our visitors over there, especially after 9/11. only about 10% of our visitors could be bussed over to see the presidential aircraft, excuse me, and the R&D aircraft. Now those, in particular, the presidential aircraft are treasures to our nation. I mean, our national history has taken place on some of those aircraft that are in the presidential gallery. The R&D aircraft were put over onto the guarded side of the base in 2002 deliberately as part of the planning for this building. The idea was we put the R&D aircraft together as one collection in this hangar on the base. Then when this new building is built, we bring all those aircraft over together instead of tearing up existing galleries, which is a lot of manpower, a lot of labor, a lot of effort. So the planning for this building goes back more than a decade, and that's why those aircraft were in hangars on the base so that they could come over as self-contained units. In the case of 2 of the airlifters, those were outside, which is really not ideal for a museum aircraft. I mean, they can be outside when they're operational, but to sit outside through several Ohio winters is not good for the object. And the 2 airlifters that are going inside are a C-130 and a C-141. The C-130 has an amazing story. It was involved in a combat action in Southeast Asia in the Vietnam War. During a very difficult time, the aircraft got damaged, and in fact, 2 of the crew members were awarded Air Force Crosses for their actions during Southeast Asia. And that's the nation's 2nd highest decoration. So it's a very significant aircraft. Our C-141 is also another very significant aircraft. It was nicknamed the Hanoi Taxi. And this C-141 Starlifter, this large jet-powered transport aircraft, was the first transport to take a load of POWs out of Hanoi at the end of the Vietnam War. Now, to put this into context, some of these POWs had been imprisoned since about 1965. So they had been imprisoned under very difficult circumstances, and this was the airplane that took them home to their families.
Okay, and we're looking at some photos now.
That's right, and there's the C-141 going into the new building.
Okay, so that's the plane you were talking about, and this is a look at kind of the plan, correct? For
That's right.
Where they'll be positioned.
And we're looking at one of the presidential aircraft, SAM-2 6000. This is the aircraft that took President Kennedy to Dallas and then brought his body back after he was assassinated. This aircraft also is the aircraft on which the famous photo of Lyndon B. Johnson taking the presidential oath took place on that airplane.
Amazing. So as we see here, are these volunteers, or does it depend on what work they're doing? They're getting ready, correct?
That's right. It depends on the work. We have volunteers. We have reservists who have helped us out. They're polishing the aircraft here. Another part of the C-141 is it actually became a flying museum while it was still flying operationally. And so in the 90s and early 2000s, it was painted as it was in the 70s, kind of a throwback marking scheme. And our local reserve unit, the 445th Airlift Wing, actually flew that aircraft operationally. So there's another local connection.
That's amazing. And it's so great to be able to see these planes. Now, all of the visitors will have accessibility to these planes, and they'll be able to see inside some of them?
That's right, yeah. Actually, the C-141 is a good example. When it was outside, it was impractical to make it accessible for visitors to get inside the aircraft. And the C-141 will be open and for visitors to walk through when it's in the new building.
That will be quite the experience, I'm sure. Mary, we talked about the history and how this whole thing got started, which was the need for space. This is not a cheap project.
No, it's not. The 4th building was funded by the foundation at a price tag of $40.8 million for that building.
It's a big investment.
Yes.
And so how is the foundation funded? Where does that money come from?
The money comes from private donations, corporate donations, all of our fundraising. You also have our membership program, our operations, the gift store, the theater, the simulators.
So some of those extra additions at the museum that you can spend a little money on, that goes toward the foundation.
The museum itself is free, free admission, free parking. But every time you shop, every time you go see a movie, you're actually giving money back to the museum.
That's great. And it's amazing that you have been able to completely fund
this building and the operation of this museum, it shows, I think, how much support there is out there for projects like this.
There's a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work went into it, but the story of the Air Force is important. That's the only reason the foundation is here, is to help support the mission of the United States Air Force in telling their story.
Absolutely, and we're lucky to have it here in Dayton. We talked a little bit about the grand opening. Jeff, do either of you have any idea how many people we expect to come to this? Is it too soon to know? You're looking at me like, who knows how many people will show up? I mean, I'm sure you're expecting a crowd.
We are. I don't know about maybe specific numbers, but there's one characteristic of the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force is that everything that's done in that institution is done on a large scale. It's always done on a grand scale. And the museum has hosted large events with 50, 60,000 people. I don't know if we're going to have quite that many people coming. We won't have that for an opening, but we do anticipate that we will have visitors coming out because of this new building. We have had many inquiries from visitors asking about when the building is going to open and what they're going to be able to see, and they're deciding to hold off coming and visiting the museum because they want to see what's inside this new building. So we're anticipating a pretty good attendance to follow the opening of the new building.
And we look at it at the Chamber of Commerce from a business point of view, from our business community, and the museum is free. It's free for folks to come, and I'm sure the hope is that people will make a road trip to Dayton, people who necessarily wouldn't otherwise come to Dayton, and while they're here, spend a little money elsewhere, whether it's a hotel stay or it's at a restaurant nearby. And that's where the business community comes into play. So can you talk about what the expectation is there, that this won't just affect the museum itself and those things directly in relation to that, but even the community around it?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it will have an effect on the business community. The National Aviation Heritage Alliance estimates that the museum brings in about $40 million a year in business to the Miami Valley, so it's definitely significant. And with the new building, we would anticipate that not only would we get additional visitors coming to the museum because there's more to see, and in the case of, for instance, the Presidential Gallery, that might attract the kind of visitor that wouldn't necessarily want to come and see World War II airplanes or jet fighters. Maybe somebody who's more interested in our national history would come and see these real treasures. But in addition, visitors will come anticipating being a museum where they're going to go through in 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and they're going to realize they're probably not going to be able to see everything in a day. So maybe they stay overnight to come to the museum for a second day that they hadn't planned, or maybe they decide, you know what, we can't see all of it on this trip, but we've got to make sure that we come back next year so we can see the parts of the museum that we didn't see. So we anticipate that there will be more visitors, and those visitors that come would stay maybe a little bit longer than they'd planned.
Absolutely. And Jeff, do you see a need for more space in the future?
Well, I think we will probably always have a need. There are other aircraft that we would like to display someday that are important to the history of the Air Force. I can assure you that the new building is full. It's very full.
We saw from the map that there are plenty of aircraft in this new building.
And so there are other aircraft that we would love to display sometime in the future. The foundation has been absolutely wonderful to the institution itself. Without the foundation, there's no way that we would have the buildings that we have now. So I'm not worried about being able to build buildings in the future. I know we've always gotten support, and I'm sure that support will come when we need it.
We talked about the importance to the business community and just the community as a whole. What can people do to support the museum, even if it's not just for the specific grand opening, the specific opening of the building, but for the foreseeable future? What can people do to make sure that they're supporting this treasure that we have here in our community?
From the museum standpoint, I think it's very straightforward. Just come out. Come out and see what the museum has. The staff has worked very hard to collect these aircraft, to make the displays, and to do all of these things for the public. And just come out and check out the museum. There's always something new to see. If it's been some time, if anyone in the listening audience hasn't been there for a year, 2, 5, 10 years, they'll be surprised at the changes at the museum. There's so much to see. It's free. If there are relatives coming in from out of town or business guests that are coming in from out of town. This is a world-class facility right in the backyard of everyone in the Miami Valley. So from the museum standpoint, if residents just come out and see what we have to offer, they would be supporting the museum. And our mission is to inspire youth and to tell the history of the U.S. Air Force. So the way to support our mission is just come out and experience the museum.
That's the story that I guess breaks your heart a little every time you hear it, as someone who is born and raised in Dayton and they say, well, I haven't been out to the museum in 10 years. It's amazing when we have this great asset right in our backyards. We should be going there all the time. So that's easy enough to do. Go to the museum, it's free. Mary, what can we do to support you?
As a foundation, every time you come to visit, every time, like I mentioned, that you shop in the store, that you buy something, we have a great aviation history here in Dayton. I'm a local, which is sometimes unusual for this area. I was born and raised here. But when you're looking for that special gift for somebody, go online, buy it from the store. You're not only buying the gift, which will probably be a unique gift, you're also supporting the foundation. You can become a member. Members will keep you updated on all the activities going on. You get special discounts. Come see a movie. Come ride one of our new simulators. We have
if you can stomach it.
Yes, we have two sets of simulators now, and we'll be adding 2 more into the 4th building.
Okay.
We also have special events that go on all the time. We bring in the Tuskegee Airmen. Dick Cole will be coming back this year, one of the Doolittle Raiders.
Okay.
We have events that you can. There is no place else that you can go and see these pilots and then walk out and see the planes that they flew. That is a unique tie. Corporations, companies, we always need sponsors for special events. We can keep these events going on. And of course, donations, so we can keep with our mission, which is to ensure that the museum is able to fulfill their mission.
Absolutely. And I did catch, can you shop online at the
Yes,
store?
you can.
You can. So you don't have to go into the store
Right.
to make a purchase. And I'll have to say, the last time I was in there were little flight suits for children, which was the cutest thing. So when you say that there are unique gifts,
Right.
you're not kidding. There are things.
We actually just got in pink flight suits
Did
too.
you?
Yes.
All right, well, now I have to go online. Now, all right, now I have my homework that I need to do. Say the date again, Jeff, the grand opening weekend.
Grand opening is the 8th of June, and then
Okay.
there'll be activities that weekend on the 11th and 12th of June.
Absolutely. Okay. We want to thank you both for being here with us today. This has been a lot of great information. I do want to ask you before we go, Jeff, one kind of personal question, because you curate the aircraft, don't you?
That's right.
What's your favorite story in the museum? Something,
Oh my gosh.
some aircraft,
Oh
some
my gosh.
story attached to an aircraft?
There's so many. There truly are so many in that museum. It's very difficult, and I have many that have touched me personally, very deeply. It's not just a job, and for a lot of us at the museum, it's not just a job. It's a vocation. If I had to pick something, I think I would probably pick the story of the Memphis Belle.
Okay.
Which is the first heavy bomber to finish 25 missions bombing over Europe and return to the United States. It's a very famous aircraft. It's in restoration right now.
Okay.
It's probably, I would argue, one of the 5 most famous U.S. aircraft of all time. They made 2 movies about it. The crew went on a war bond tour when they got back. They were rock stars of the time. This is about 1943.
Okay.
And the Memphis Belle is the one aircraft that represents the 30,000 airmen who were killed in Europe in World War II. I mean, it's not very well known how deadly the skies were over Europe. We lost 30,000 killed.
Wow.
And so this aircraft is in restoration right now. We intend to roll it out to a grand public opening in May of 2018.
Wow.
We will certainly have visitors from Europe, from across the world, and the story of these young men who left their homes, 19, 20, 21 years old, and fought to defend the country against the Nazi scourge, and many of them didn't come back. It's really represented by this artifact. So I think that, to me, is, if I had to pick one, that would probably be the most touching and poignant.
Right, which I'm sure, as you said, adds a little something extra to your job. That you know, you're not just curating aircraft. There are stories and there are lives attached to the history behind these pieces that you have on display at the museum. So I can understand how that could affect you. Now, you said that it's being worked on right now. Is that how long it takes to restore an aircraft?
Every restoration is different.
Okay.
This is a stem to stern complete restoration, every single part of the aircraft. And the craftsmen that we have in restoration they are magicians. They can do anything, and they are constantly faced with questions that there is no book to go to find the answer. They have to use their ingenuity and skill and talent and judgment and experience. But we are going to great lengths to ensure that the aircraft is restored exactly as it was in May of 1943 when the Belle finished its 25th mission. And when they are done with it, it will be fully and completely restored, and then have a place of honor in the World War II gallery in the museum.
That's amazing. And we saw those photos. We saw the volunteers and others working on restoring some of the aircraft for this fourth building. When did that work begin? Getting these particular planes ready for the fourth building?
The work began some time ago. Again, our restoration staff is incredible. They have more than 300 aircraft to take care of, and that includes everything: tires, seals, canopies, everything. And so the work has been ongoing because there's quite a bit of work. They also hang the aircraft.
I'm
They
sure
do
that's
it
not an
themselves.
easy job.
It's amazing. They move the aircraft, and it may look straightforward on the drawing, but to actually physically get these airplanes into those places is tremendously difficult. And then in addition to our paid staff members, we have more than 500 volunteers at the museum who do a wide range of duties that we couldn't operate without our volunteers. We love our volunteers. And some of those volunteers are in restoration.
Okay.
They're retired machinists, retired engineers, retired Air Force maintenance folks, things like that. So they're part of the team as well that support our restoration staff and do some of the work as well.
Okay, so it's not just polishing or
Oh, no.
painting the aircraft. There's more involved. I
No,
take.
there's sometimes there are parts that we call it, they're made out of a material called unobtainium.
Okay.
The parts don't exist. So if they don't exist, they have to be fabricated. And sometimes those parts are fairly complicated. It's important that they use, in some cases, the techniques that were done 50 or 60 years ago, because it's not authentic if they don't. So there's some huge challenges that our folks in restoration deal with, and they're always successful. I mean, they're an incredibly talented group of people.
And I imagine with all the work that's involved with each aircraft, do they get a backlog? Because then they still have to maintain the planes that are on display in the museum when they're getting ready for this opening.
That's right. There's a pretty substantial backlog, but an important point is that in spite of the backlog, as long as those airframes are preserved or stored properly so they don't further deteriorate, we don't want to rush through restorations. You know, many times these aircraft are one of a kind. Like in the case of the Memphis Belle, it is a national icon. There is no other aircraft like the Memphis Belle. There are other B-17Fs that are still around, but not the Memphis Belle. That's a treasure. So it is an artifact that we are going to care for and restore very carefully. So the backlog, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're certainly not going to rush through restorations.
Absolutely. And if the curator points to the Memphis Belle as his favorite amongst all these wonderful planes, then we should look forward. You say May 2018? We'll be
May
able to see that?
2018, and I'm not alone in having the Memphis Belle as a favorite either.
Okay.
So.
Do you have a favorite, Mary?
It's not so much the airplanes, it's the stories and the people. I love the World War II era, and we've had quite a few of the pilots, the paratroopers from D-Day and so forth that have come in and spoke, and to see them just come in and look at their aircraft. And you may just be going through and see someone seeing their aircraft that they actually flew on. And just to see the look in their eyes and them sharing with their grandchildren or their children what their experience was.
Yeah, that's got to be a special thing to
Yes.
see them kind of stop. And
In fact, we had one of the POWs who flew on the Hanoi Taxi after it was put outside actually came. And he came just to see that aircraft and what it meant to him.
wow. So it's definitely important that we keep
Yes.
these well maintained and available for everyone to come and see and appreciate the history. Well, I think we could talk about all the planes that are available to see for days and days. But I think, Jeff, that you hit the nail on the head that you can't, if you have been to the museum anytime, even recently or not, you know that you can't see everything in just a matter of a few hours. So you want to schedule several stops, several visits, and don't stop going because things, I'm sure, are constantly changing. Right. Do you rotate out different exhibits from time to time? I'm sure moving planes is not an easy thing to do. But
No, we do from time to time. We've had a lot of focus on the Southeast Asia War Gallery in the last 4 years. In 2010, we completely redid our Korean War Gallery. Everything that's in there is new as of 2010. So there are touch screens, there are new exhibits, new artifacts put on display. There's a B-29 fuselage to walk through. It's a World War II era bomber that visitors can walk through. So we do add new exhibits. Last February, in February 2015, we opened a brand new large exhibit on the Tuskegee Airmen. And in conjunction with that, there was a restoration of a World War II trainer, which is absolutely fantastic. It's configured and marked and restored exactly as it was when it rolled out of the Boeing plant during World War II. Pretty amazing. So definitely, if a visitor hasn't been there in a year, 2 or 3, there are new things to see.
There are things you're missing. Okay, so plan your trip now. What's the website they need to go to get some information?
The museum's website is nationalmuseum.af.mil. Can also be found using any search engine.
Yep, just type it in there. All right, well, thank you both for being with us
Thank you.
and sharing this great information. And to anyone at home, make sure that you head out and find out more and make your plans for when that 4th building opens. It's very exciting, and the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce is a great supporter of this as well, along with our business community. If you want to know more information about the Chamber, you can always head to DaytonChamber.org or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Holly Allen, Director of Marketing Communications for the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. Thanks so much for being with us.
Our region, once again, has some really great news that is directly related to being the home of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, that being our National Museum of the United States Air Force. Today's program highlighted the expansion of the museum to its 4th building and the expansion of its economic impact and visitor growth to that attraction and our region. We're a military town. We all know the impact of the base and how important it is to our economy and the future of air and space in the Air Force. We are extremely fortunate to have leaders, past and present, who decided to place this iconic display of our military air superiority near the same fields the Wright brothers tested and improved flight for all future uses. We look forward to our June opening of the new building, our expanded displays, and the museum's continued mission of sharing our history of military flight with the men and women of our Air Force, our citizen enthusiasts, and our children who will be our future pilots and leaders in air and space.